What's going on? I want to make this video about drug education, I guess, drug safety. I love talking about drugs. So, I really want to make this video about safety because so many people, I guess I'm realizing that so many people use drugs without really having a basis or understanding of drugs. Drugs can be very dangerous. Not all drugs are the same. You can have many molecules that look alike, but are completely different from one another. THC is a drug, but methamphetamine is a drug. Adderall is a drug. These are all drugs. I've made videos about how, I've never done cocaine, I've never done meth, I've never done heroin. There are certain drugs that I have always stayed away from because I know my own personality. I have a very addictive personality, so therefore, even when I experiment with a substance like kratom, I end up getting addicted to it. The plan was just to experiment with it again, basically. But I ended up kind of getting addicted to it again, and that's fine. But that's because I was, in a sense, willing to get addicted to kratom again. I knew the risks, I knew the pros, and I knew the cons. The cons of meth, the cons of heroin, the cons of Adderall, all those drugs, the cons are way too high. The risks are way too high for me to ever try those things. Even alcohol, right? Alcohol is a drug that I've always stayed away from because it has been a pointless drug to me. There is no reason. When I know of so many other substances, so many other plants, so many other things, alcohol is just the one where the cons just outweigh the pros. It ends up being more harmful to the body than I would like it to be. It ends up, there's no medicinal benefits to drinking alcohol. It's not going to help you with your health. It's not going to help you live longer. It's not going to help you with your memory or even help you, in a sense, get woke. So therefore, I really have no interest. But that's the thing. Drugs are completely different from one another. In our society, people usually base drugs off of alcohol because that's the one that we all know of. So, like I was watching this thing, it was Vsauce, and he was basically doing this experiment thing where he faked giving people drugs, and basically trying to see if people conform. It was about conformity. But the basis of the placebo effect is that basically if you give somebody a sugar pill and you tell them that it was morphine, that they'll start feeling like they took morphine. Now, this person was told that she was going to take a new psychedelic substance. So, in a sense, her mind started making her feel the substance. But she described it as if she had one or two drinks. And it had me thinking that that's because most of the human experiences, with drugs is alcohol. So most people base their drug experiences off of alcohol, comparing it to alcohol. I've heard a lot of people compare drugs and say, I took a this and it kind of made me feel dizzy like alcohol, or it kind of made me feel warm like alcohol, or whatever. And because I've used so many different substances and some of the substances that people compare alcohol um, to me, I'm like, it doesn't really compare. They don't really, because I don't use alcohol. So when I'm comparing a drug, I usually compare it to marijuana because cannabis is the drug that I've used the most often. So when I use a substance, usually it gets compared to cannabis, but really all drugs, unless they attach to a similar receptor, are all in their own category. Um, but there are things that attach to the GABA receptor that'll have similar effects to another thing that attaches to the GABA receptor, or it's the reason why all the synthetic cannabinoids feel similar to THC, just some of them are more psychedelic than THC, or some of them are not as psychoactive as THC, or the difference between delta 8 THC and delta 9 THC. Delta 9 is more psychoactive. Delta 8 is less likely to cause anxiety or anything like that. Um, but drugs are drugs. And it's all about being educated. You need to test your substances, but sometimes even when you test your substances, it doesn't matter. Because there are substances that can, on a test kit, come out as MDMA, but not be MDMA. There are substances that can come out, like for example, I've heard a bunch of people talk about how they've taken MDMA, and one person said there was like no visuals whatsoever with it. And it had me thinking, maybe they didn't do MDMA. Maybe it was 5-MAPB. Or maybe it was something else, right? Maybe it was methadone. Maybe it was whatever. There's so many different things that can give similar effects to MDMA that you really don't know unless you test your substances and you know where it's coming from. It's just one of those things where you have to know where you're getting your shit from. You have to test it, and it's just the main thing is knowing where it's coming from, because even if you test it, how do you know your LSD is LSD 25? How do you know it's not 1P-LSD or ethlad or something else? You don't know. Which is why you should always just know where it's coming from. Don't buy drugs from the streets necessarily. Try to be a little more what's the word? Because it's like I'm very not stingy when it comes to drugs, but like I'm very specific, because that's the main reason why I've never done cocaine, because none of you are doing 90% cocaine. None of you are. And I've heard people talk about one time they got pure cocaine, but they had to cut it before they put it on the streets because it would kill somebody. That's because humans are so fucking stupid when it comes to cocaine that they cut it, and they've been cutting it since the 80s. If since the 80s humans only used pure cocaine, then everybody today would be a little more careful with the cocaine, because they would say, if I sniff too much, I'll die. Now it's like this weird thing where humans, I've seen it in person. I've never done cocaine, but I've seen people use cocaine. So like, I've seen people sniff line after line after line, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, bro, there's no way that's cocaine. Like, because it's just this weird thing. Now, I understand there are so many synthetic molecules. There are synthetically made cocaines. Basically, molecules that are related to cocaine that have similar effects to cocaine. Basically, if you can create a synthetic molecule that can numb your shit just like cocaine, then how the fuck would you know the difference? Because a lot of gangster drug dealers, they're not really testing their drugs. You know how a lot of gangsters test their cocaine? They put it on their gums, and if their gums get numb, then they say it's pure. That don't mean shit. There are many molecules that I can order from China, many molecules that I can order online that can make your gums numb. Many of them can give similar stimulant effects that cocaine gives. I just think that humans lack basic education, and this is the problem with the drug war. Even the people, our government, right? The DEA, the FDA, the this, the that. They know nothing about drugs. Nothing. They have no idea that they think, this is how stupid they are. They think you make cocaine illegal, you make meth illegal, you make heroin illegal, and make psychedelics illegal, and make MDMA illegal. That's fine. Let's move on with our lives, Let's keep drugs away from the people. But they're stupid. You make MDMA illegal, over 1,000 MDMA molecules were created. Over 1,000. Probably over 100,000. How many synthetic opioids have been created since, since drug dealers can't sell heroin, it's hard for them to get heroin. They're like, well, I'll order this molecule from China and sell it as heroin. This is what's happening. People sell things as MDMA that are not MDMA. People sell heroin that's not heroin. People sell LSD that's not LSD. There's thousands of molecules like LSD, thousands of synthetic cannabinoids, thousands of synthetic this, synthetic that, and every single day there are hundreds of new chemicals and new drugs being synthesized and created every single day. Right now there are chemists that are making drugs just for when their drugs that they created last year become illegal. Like, this is something that I don't think the government or the DEA really expected, but it's what they created. It's their fault, because you can't blame people for wanting to get high. You have to blame the government for not educating us. You don't blame the child for running out in the middle of the street necessarily. You blame the parents for not teaching the child. It's that thing. We are to blame for, as a whole, as a society, we are to blame for being uneducated on drugs. We are to blame for all the deaths that have been caused from the drugs. Because this is all based on education, teaching our children how to use drugs instead of teaching our children to try to stay away from drugs, because that's very naive. It's very naive of an adult to think that your children are not going to use drugs. That's very stupid. They're going to use drugs. And some humans are so stupid that they think that, I only smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. I don't use drugs. That some people are that stupid. But it goes back to being educated, that our society does not educate people on the fact that cigarettes are just as addictive or maybe even more addictive than heroin. Because, man, how many people want to quit smoking cigarettes but say they can't? I know so many people that want to quit smoking cigarettes but can't. And when cigarettes, that drug that doesn't really do much for you, it's kind of stupid. Considering, if I look at, like I said in the beginning of this video, I look at drugs like pros and cons. Do the pros outweigh the cons? If a drug is addictive, is it beneficial for me to use? Kratom there are benefits to Kratom. There is motivation. There is so many good things to Kratom. But if I look at, should I start smoking cigarettes? There is no benefit to that conversation. There is nothing. There is nothing that anybody can tell me that can say, cigarettes help with this, or cigarettes help with that, or cigarettes don't do shit but cause you anxiety, and then brainwash you to think they take that anxiety away just because you start going through a nicotine drug withdrawal. Therefore, you take a puff out of the cigarette and no more nicotine drug withdrawal. The nicotine drug withdrawal is that anxiety you feel. Humans are so caught in an addiction that they can't tell why they're even smoking the cigarette. They're smoking the cigarette to keep away those withdrawal symptoms. You're no longer smoking the cigarette because you enjoy tobacco. You're smoking the cigarette to keep that withdrawal away. It's the same thing that happens with heroin addicts. And it's the same thing that can happen with kratom addicts. Heroin addicts are not getting high. They're staying the fuck away from the withdrawal. It's just how it is.